So I'm Alexa Fullerton Canales, and I'm from California. I was born in Pasadena, but I lived in San Luis Obispo. And I have two daughters, and my marriage was on the rocks in '84. So I said to my husband, look, we got to take a break from California. Let's go to Mexico. It's close enough to California. See what comes up. We went to the beach, and, he immediately lost the children on the beach when I went into the bathroom. So I said, no, beach isn't working. Let's go. I've heard of San Miguel de Allende. So we went to Mexico City, and we took a taxi from Mexico City all the way to San Miguel de Allende. And the taxi cab driver had no idea where we were. But we get up, and my husband's like, are you sure you know where you're going? Of course not. I mean, I've never been there before. And so we get up to the Atascadero, and we think this is San Miguel de Allende, which turned out to be for us. So we lived at the Atascadero Hotel for about a month, which was very cool. The children were in their little footy pajamas, and we would go to the dining room, and, everybody just loved children. So they just make little beds for them, and they just while we ate dinner, and, the people that worked at the Hotel Atascadero would come and make little fires in our little room so it'd be warm and toasty. It was winter. And I decided, man, this is where I'd like to be. The beach isn't as interesting to me as a town that has art galleries and old cathedrals and cobblestone streets and wonderful people. And so I went back to California, and then I moved in March of '84. Came down, put my kids in Bambi, the little preschool, and they were the only little blonde, American kids. And because it was Montessori, they just learned Spanish in one day. I had taken Spanish classes, but my life was pick the kids up from school, go to them like a kid of mine, chicken breast. It was. And so I had my market ladies that absolutely adored me and watched out for me and would put aside stuff for me. And, we only would get meat once a week. We get chicken once a week. It wasn't a regular where there's shrimp and where there's, lamb and chuletas and all. No, but that was fine with us. And a darling lady came by and said, oh, can I be your housekeeper? I go, sure. Why not? I'm going down to the Instituto to learn to speak Spanish with the list of 10,000 words that you do in every conjugation, and putting my kids in nursery school. And so she said, well, I really cook. I could make a baby. And so she cooked for us. And she was just our darling, helper, housekeeper. And Kathy Dodson was my next door neighbor. And on the other side was Sylvia in the Atascadero, that I rented this house. And, and Sylvia that owns the art gallery, I can't think of her last, Sylvia Samuelson was on my other side. And Ginger Eanes was up on top. And so I had a pretty cool neighborhood, And then I met, there were 3 or 4 other families that were, Juan Nieto and Chris Nieto and Amber. So there was a little girl, there was a little, and Pamela Serafine, Federico Serafine, and let's see who else. I think there's, Andrea Usher, right? And so we had our little group of little blonde children. I need to do something besides just go memorize Spanish verbs. So Kathy had a couple of horses, and in Hotel Atascadero, I had this old riding stables. So I said, well, let's just do riding classes for kids. Got myself a Pony Club book, went and talked to the owners of the Hotel Atascadero, and they said, oh, sure. And General Mycott, said, oh, I'll just write you a letter inviting you as my guest so you don't have to worry about working papers or anything. I go, okay. Not that I knew anything about working papers or anything really about horses. I've been to camp. I had been to camp. So opened the stables up. And I didn't know it had been a famous place for like 25 years. So all these people show up and want to ride and do stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. And so I hired someone from Canada to come and help me do it that really knew horses. And I knew picnics, movie night, hotels, spas, stuff. And meanwhile, I'm relearning how to ride again. But I got like intensive classes because I would have to go out to the ranches here around and buy horses for the school and and this very elegant older man, very Spanish, very polite, would come by every afternoon, and it was Capitan Canales, who had had the school for like 25 years. But he didn't tell me that. And he'd say, oh, do you need any help? And I'm just like, with a dirt mustache. And I'm like, oh, I need some help. And he'd say, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you organize like this? And that big fountain in the middle of this stall, don't let all the horses drink out of that. Give them each buckets, because if one is sick, they'll get in the water and their heart gets sick. I go, oh, wow, thanks. And he built a whole cross-country jumping, and he had built all of this stuff. And after I was, into it for a while, that something came up, big drama, big crisis, that the hotel had a contract with my husband and not with me. And they were standing up for my husband, and I had to get the hell out. So the night of the altars here, I'm out walking through town with a horse in each hand, and I had two helpers, and they each had a horse in each hand. And then the horseshoer, Bartolo, was riding my two white horses, one riding one white horse down the carnival, no traffic at all, and leading the other one down to my property here in El Mirador that I had already purchased. So I'm going around knocking on people's doors, and people are like, they think it's like some kind of ceremony that I'm involved in, walking along with horses. They're just, oh, bless you, thanks. So knocked on doors, got everybody placed, got all the horses placed, and, went back to my house in the Atascadero and started building my stables down here. Capitan Canales said, my son is coming back from the United States, and he's an equine veterinarian. I'm like, God, because all the vets here were chicken and pig and dog and cat vets. So if anything was wrong with my horses, they go, looks fine to me. See ya. And so, of course, Eugenio comes and he's the vet, and he said, oh, you have to come and see me ride. Every Mexican man I met said, oh, come and see me ride. It's like, come on, man, get like a sack of potatoes. I have a job. I have children. I'm going to school. I'm learning Spanish. I really have time to come and see you ride. Excellent, excellent. Very good. So Eugenio said, come and see me ride. I go, oh, sure, I will. It's on my list. But I had a dog that ate something, and I needed atropine because it was poisoned. So I go up to Alforcero where Eugenio's riding. And of course, the guy rides like Baryshnikov dances. I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay, good. And so he helps me with the dog. And that he was my neighbor in the Atascadero because I still lived in the Atascadero. I didn't have a house down there. And so I was on the board of the, chamber music, the Winter Festival with Gilberto Munguia. And so he said, okay, we're having this party and bring somebody. So I would bring Eugenio because he spoke English, he had good manner, he had a dinner jacket. Perfect. But it was so weird because we would go, and here's Eugenio, so well-mannered, so polite. And people would come up to him and say, I have a gin and tonic. And he'd say, let me find a waiter. Or people would come in, take off their coats and hand them to me. He goes, let me find someone to take your coat. He's so polite, And somebody said, she's so well-dressed for a Mexican. He's a doctor. Hello. But anyway, it bothered me a lot more than it bothered him. He just water off a duck's. My family moved to Mexico after the Second World War. My mother said, okay, I'm just done. We're hanging out till you get back from war. Let's do something. Let's go to Mexico. So she got my dad all excited to go to Mexico, or he wanted to be a writer. So they came to Mexico in probably 1948. And I was 2. And once they got here, my mother goes, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant. Because she knew if she told beforehand, no going to Mexico. And so they just had a blast, and like the embassy had a list of all the Americans, because there were so few, that to invite to parties. And my dad was a polo player. And so they found out he was a polo player. So he just played polo with all the Mexicans. And there was a bunch of people from Oklahoma in Mexico City. But it was the glory days. It was the glory days, And so actually the first language I learned was Spanish, because I had Spanish nannies, I had Spanish friends. I had American friends, but they only spoke Spanish, And so, like, my mom tells a story about how she's driving along, and I'm with my friend Penny in the back seat. She goes, ask your mom if we could have a lollipop. And I go, okay. And of course, my mom could understand in Spanish, at least that much. And I go, may we have a lollipop? And she goes, no, you can't have a lollipop now. It's going to be, but it was this whole double thing. But then after 3 years, when we left Mexico, my brother was 3 years old. We came back to the United States, and I met my American cousins for the first time at Pasadena. And I stand up and I'm speaking Spanish to them, and they laughed at me. Never spoke another word. And they brought the nanny with her child and everything, so I would keep my Spanish.
Oh.
But, Eugenio was just so darling, and I had like this loser bullfighter boyfriend, after being married for so many years, of course, you go for the bullfighter, the unstable person. So I had won a horse show with my horses, and I'm like, boo, 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 the bullfighter, and goes, I'm the one that loves you. I'm the one that takes care of you. I'm the one that goes to all your children's, recitals and school plays. I'm the one that when your car breaks down picks you up. I'm the one that is your, companion to all these parties. And I think you wake up and smell the roses, but just don't ever call me again as your vet, your trainer, anything. I've hung around now for 3 years, waiting for you to wake up. And I go, oh my God. Okay, come home to my house right now and we'll sleep together. And he goes, yeah, you are such a nervous wreck. You are a lady, as I am blinking for you. I almost had a heart attack and died. And I'm just like, what? And so every night for like 6 months after he rode his horses and after I rode my horses, he'd come to my house, and my little girls then are like 6 and 8, and he would help with the homework, and they would have their little quesadilla dinner or whatever it was. And he'd go, okay, it's time to put your kids to bed. Good night. I'll see you tomorrow, and go home. And then he'd call me at like 10 at night and go, good night, Mama. Don't forget who loves you, and I'll see you tomorrow. And I'm just like, yay. And so I was just like, and so then, we've just been together ever since, He really courted me, and he really courted my daughters. Like he'd say, okay, let's go out to Sunday lunch. So they'd get their little dresses and everything, and he'd go out to Outpost and goes, I have new lamps. And they go, we want to see the lambs. So in his boots and his beautiful, running through the grass fields until he caught a lamb. As they get back and they go, thank you. Yeah. I mean, he was just so darn nice. Such a good guy, His dad introduced me to him. So his dad and I were friends, And then I would call like for vet emergencies and talk to his mom, or go up because she was my neighbor, go up to her house and knock on the door. And, she always had like her heel was combed and her earrings were on. I'm like, and she had how many children? 10 children. But the family was so darling to me. Everybody, divorced woman with 2 children, 10 years older than their son doctor back in town, And I go, how can you pick me? And he goes, because you're independent. If I go out on a vet call at night, I don't have to call somebody in the family to come and stay with you. And I don't have to explain myself. And, you can, you don't ask me what should you wear every day. And I go, really? Okay, great. I did lose custody of my children to my ex-husband for 2 years. That he and my dad teamed up and said, okay, she's abandoned, California and run off with the children. And so, the court put a restraining order against me. My children had gone to California for Christmas. And so I spent 2 years fighting for my children, and I did get them back. And the judge decided, no, you're the better parent and you can take them to Mexico. But when I first went to court, it was, okay, you're living in Mexico with a younger Mexican male, just ageism, racism, sexism. Yeah, restraining order sticks, And so it was, pretty complicated. But when I came back, I began to work for a children's rights organization, which was at that time Fundakai, which is now FI. And what I was trying to do, because my children were in school, was get summer programs for teachers, because I realized that there wasn't really child development classes, that you go through the teaching program and then that's it. And so I wanted to create, a summer program where the teachers got paid and they could go to the summer program and learn about child development or learn more, about just what was relevant. Then I met Sylvia Van Dyke, and she was then with Save the Children, that then became Fundakai, that then became FI. And I go, why reinvent the wheel? And so that was a children's rights organization, based on the International Convention of Children's Rights, that this Ellen Jean Jebb, who was a journalist from England, went after the First World War to write about the victory of England over Germany, and she just wrote total disaster for the children. This is a total disaster, and wrote article after article after article, went back to England, and they jailed her as a traitor, where she wrote the International Convention of Children's Rights, I did articles for the Attention for different things, and at some point, I think Kate was involved in Audubon, and there was a transitional period, and Mario, who's now the head of Charco, and all of this. And so Mario and I we just received, or I said, yeah, I'll help you, and received all of this paperwork. So we made this incredible history of the Audubon from Dottie Vidargas's mom and Dottie Vidargas and all the different, things to get a picture of Audubon in San Miguel. And then, I don't know, they closed the office. Mario and I didn't have access anymore, and everything, they may still have it, but I don't know anything about it. It just disappeared, because we were going to do this presentation of Audubon. And they could still very well have it, but I'm just with FI. So because FI, we don't reinvent the wheel. We work with anything that does empowerment. So we work with Charco de Eugenio. We worked with Rio Laja. We work with CASA. We work with Audubon. Anybody that's, giving people tools to live. And we, people say, oh, I'll give you food or I'll give you clothes. I don't know. We don't do that. I love it here. And I do have a house in the States, a little beach house in the town of Carpinteria. And that's lovely. But my life is here. That my husband has 9 brothers and sisters and 1 million cousins and nephews and nieces. And I am so at home here, have so much family here, and we have so much interaction that I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine living in the States again, And my youngest daughter has just married a Colombian who's a sound engineer, and she's a nurse, and she's a singer-songwriter. And so, they're going to come for 2 months. They're going to come at Christmas and see for 2 months if they can find work or how it could be. And my other daughter, is also a bilingual nurse, and she's in Florida, and she would love to come back here. And now there's so many more schools and all of that. And, she said, well, what could I do, Mom? And I go, well, there's so many elderly. You could do wonderful geriatric care because you're so kind and so loving and speak Spanish and could really help people. But it's such a big risk to take, to come down here, and work and do that. but they're very grateful that they had this magical life growing up here. They were very, very grateful. Yeah. Well, San Miguel gave that to them, you know.